So I was approached during the start of the pandemic. During the pandemic, some people did new things like they got a puppy or something like that. And
Right.
I got a new a vocation in addition to healthcare, which is in cybersecurity. Some researchers in Sweden approached me and said, we've scanned the whole internet, and around the world, the most vulnerable organizations are US hospitals. And they were
Wow.
exactly correct, because there's been a lot of ransomware, for hospitals. A hospital is a chaotic environment to begin with, and it's also an environment that is very susceptible to cybersecurity issues. And I'll give you an example. So if you think about a hospital, if you think about a factory, so a factory has a lot of systems that are in place. They have a lot of security potentially, and they've got a gate outside of it, and you have to have an ID card to come in, and they've got cameras looking at everything. And certainly, if you're going to touch any of the machinery, you're going to be well qualified, and you're going to be screened, and everything's going to be sensitive. Now, a hospital, although they may have some security, basically patients and doctors, and people are being rushed in. And then they do have advanced equipment like MRI machines and so on. As we call these OT, occupational operational technology, as opposed to IT, information technology. All these things are filled with computers and are quite easily hackable. So when you have now all these medical records that are online, that is very sensitive information for a patient. And whereas, let's say if somebody steals your credit card information, yeah, maybe they'll charge some funds and the bank might be defrauded. If somebody steals your healthcare information, that is very sensitive and very personal, and you can't just cancel your medical record, and go to get a new one. So these are very sensitive pieces of information, and sometimes it could be used certainly for phishing, but also sometimes for obtaining benefits, obtaining benefits, or for identity theft. So in the US, a lot of times people will ask for your social security number when you sign up as a new patient, and you should never give it to them. There's no reason that the physician should have that information. They don't actually need it. They don't use that information anymore for your Medicare record, but a lot of people routinely ask for it. And so my social security number is kept in any number of places. I don't give mine out, but most people's are kept in any number of places that are not prepared actually to protect it. So we see some of the same issues of cybersecurity that we see elsewhere, but data privacy is a bigger factor. Now, if we go to the next level and think about more industrial hacking, if you look at medical devices, so a lot of people have implanted medical devices, right? So these send a signal. Let's say the implanted cardio defibrillator sends a signal to the heart when it needs to shock it, to bring it back into rhythm, or when it stops. Well, I'll let you use your imagination, but if a bad actor gets a hold of that kind of control, that could be a problem. So we're seeing cybersecurity in medical devices becoming an issue. We're also seeing it, as I mentioned before, there's a lot of private equity investment in healthcare. And sometimes when they're investing in a small organization, they'll say, well, these guys aren't really, they're not really focused on, they're not really a target. They're too small, or nobody knows about them, or it's too esoteric. As soon as they're connected to a private equity fund that has $1 billion, or even if they have less, all of a sudden they're a target. It's not what you do, it's who you're connected with and how you might actually reach into them. So the technologies that are out there now, you can scan the entire internet, as I had described before, if you're advanced, a nation state, for example, and you'll find these connections, and you'll say, okay, that's Joe's garage. It's owned by Joe. I'm not interested. But now if Joe's garage is owned by, Acme Private Equity,
Sure.
now I'm interested in it. So these are the sort of things we're seeing in healthcare, as healthcare gets more investment from private equity as well.
It's very interesting. So actually, like you probably should, there's some leverage that potential kind of, cyber attacker has, actually, if they go for it's very interesting.
They do. Now, the thing is that on the one hand, it's a real threat, but on the other hand, ransomware has actually done more to get people interested. Before the CEO or CFO, they didn't really care about cybersecurity very much, these data breaches and so on. Okay, not such a big deal, but now they care about it because of ransomware. They know about it. Now, it does there's a defensive side, but then there's also a more of a building of a strategic asset as well. Because now, if some of these smaller companies are going out to work with the large players, either whether those are governments or let's say a big health insurer like United Healthcare, those entities are now asking about the cybersecurity and data privacy posture of these smaller companies. So it becomes an advantage. Instead of saying, hey, I'm 2% less expensive or people like me more, I can say, look, I have ISO 27001 certification, or I have some other certification where I can demonstrate what I do in terms of vulnerability scanning, in terms of penetration testing, in terms of policies and procedures, and the ability to recover after an attack. And that is now being a differentiator that the organizations can use when they're signing up new customers, but also when they go to market. And when you have entities that are doing due diligence on them, say, wow, these guys are really robust. This ties in with data privacy as well, in particular in Europe with the GDPR, where the focus is on minimization of the data that's held, and then also not having it when you don't need it anymore. So if some data is not there, the only way data could be breached is if it's there. So if I've got data that I don't need as an organization, best thing is not to keep it anymore. And that way, if I am breached, because it could happen, at least the data won't not be exposed because I won't have them. It's a very simple concept, but it's actually helping organizations realize, yeah, okay, instead of just hoarding all the data that I can about everybody that I come into contact with, I actually have to be careful about it and minimize what I've got and then encrypt it at rest. And